Cuyahoga County Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, October 19th, 2021 is now called to order. Andrea, would you please call the roll?
Good afternoon. It is now 2:08 p.m. As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Tuma. Mr. Tuma is absent. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schran.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney is absent. Council President Jones.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Andrea.
Council President, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mr. Sweeney today.
Second. And seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Councilman Sweeney is excused. Did you include Tuma in that as well? I'll make a motion. All right, we want him excused.
Second.
Moved and, who is the second?
Miller.
Brown.
Council, second. Andrea, second.
Yes.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, our colleagues are excused. Madam Clerk, at this time, if you would read items, both items, A and B, into the record.
Okay. Resolution 2021-0218, a resolution amending the 2020-2021 biennial operating budget for 2021 by providing for additional fiscal appropriation transfers, and cash transfers. And B, Resolution 2021-0219, authorizing the issuance and sale of one or more series of county sales tax revenue bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $202,500,000 for the purpose of paying or reimbursing the costs of reconstructing, refurbishing, renovating, upgrading, improving, and equipping Progressive Field, together with appurtenances and work incidental thereto.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Do we have a department representative to our present to speak to this item?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, also Vice President Stevens and members of council. For the viewing audience, my name is Ken Silliman. I'm chairman of the Gateway Economic Development Corporation of Greater Cleveland. This is the third committee of the whole where we have presented regarding the previously read resolutions. We are here today principally to address Councilmember Stevens' request at the last meeting that the Gateway entity appear and walk through the diversity numbers of some recent projects. Gateway, as we previously testified, adopted a resolution several years ago endorsing the community benefits agreement that was promulgated back in 2013. We have taken those responsibilities very seriously, both at the board member and at the staff level as well. To give our presentation, Gateway's Executive Director, Todd Greathouse, and Daniela Nunnally of his staff will present the requested information. At the conclusion of our presentation, I will be available as well as the staff members to answer any questions from the council. Thank you.
At this time, Andrea, let's go back. Has anyone signed in for public comment?
Yes, Council President, we have public comment. The first is Paul F. Marnichek.
Do I take it off?
You can.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Jones, Vice Chair Stevens, and members of the Cuyahoga County Council. My name is Paul Marnichek, and I currently have the pleasure of serving as president of North Royalton City Council. I know My county council member had that honor when he was on Strongsville City Council. It's very rewarding. I know also Mayor Ben Holbert of Woodmere spoke to you last week, and I want to join him in supporting the proposed upgrade and improvement to our progressive field. While the ballpark is located in downtown Cleveland, the benefits do ripple out to all of Cuyahoga County. All of the suburbs in Cuyahoga County are affected in many ways by the health and progress of our central city. It generates tax revenue, job creation, and other economic upsides that benefit every community in Cuyahoga County. There are thousands of jobs that are tied directly or indirectly to Progressive Field. The people who hold those jobs live in the neighborhoods throughout Cleveland and the rest of Cuyahoga County, and their income helps us do many of the great things we're doing in many of those municipalities. There are tremendous charitable benefits to the civic and community organizations throughout Greater Cleveland, thanks to Progressive Field. I believe that any fair, independent examination of the project demonstrates that this is good for Cuyahoga County and our residents. We need to protect and preserve Progressive Field. It not only fields our professional baseball team, but it also affects us economically and in many other positive ways. The team, just like those of us that call Northeast Ohio home, are both scrappy and very practical. They aren't asking for a new facility, which many other teams in Major League Baseball are asking for. They want to make the most of their investment and the public investment in Progressive Field so far to date. This is a partnership that is working and is a very prudent investment. Thank you for your consideration of this proposal, and I encourage you all to please support it. Thank you.
Nina McClellan.
Good afternoon, Council President Jones and Vice President Stevens and members of the Council. My name is Nina McClellan. I come with no political or financial clout, just a member of the community. And I would like to speak with great concern about this deal, which looks like it's being rammed through on a very fast track. It looks like it's been negotiated and worked out behind closed doors with the powers that be in this community and without community participation. So I have to ask, why the rush? Is it to help a multi-billionaire, Paul Dolan? He's worth about $4.6 billion with that will increase his bottom line worth of the team. I ask, where was the rush when we have children for years who were being lead poisoned in this community? There was no rush then, and I don't see a rush now to help people in danger of eviction, in danger this winter of having their utilities cut off. Why the rush when we know that Cleveland will have a new administration and a new council coming up? It doesn't seem right to have a lame duck administration and council pass on these kinds of important decisions. It's a very complicated deal, and it's difficult for the public, people like me, to understand it. I don't understand exactly what the upgrades are supposed to be. What is it? Lots of millions of dollars for the upper deck. What is that for? Loges, for fancy loges, for wealthy people? I don't know. I don't also understand the financing. This has not been explained to the public in terms that we can understand. I understand there's a big short-term outlay of public money, but what are the implications over the long term? Understand part of this is the bed tax. What if the estimates for the bed tax are incorrect. Then do you go back to the general fund to make up the difference? And should general fund be money be used for this, for private gain? So the public needs more information that we're able to understand. And then I ask, should this be a priority for these millions of public dollars? Where's the public benefit, and what are the alternative uses of that money? I don't hear discussion about that. We're sick and tired of cozy deals that have been done without public input. We look at how there's been no full disclosure, and the public has not had a voice nor a vote. I think back to the Q deal, when the activists in this community tried to get a vote, were very close to getting a vote, and that was scotched by the powers that be. So then this deal is touted by the business community, but what's the hard evidence here? Will the upgrades really bring more people downtown? A lot of people think that what brings people downtown is a winning team, not upgrades to things at the stadium. And what's the evidence that the sports facilities produce jobs, the promised jobs? What's been the record for other public investment in sports facilities? I don't know. Have the jobs really come through in the way that was promised? Are these living wage jobs? Are they part-time jobs? Part of the year jobs? We want answers, and we, the public, want to be included.
Take a moment and give us your final thought.
Pardon?
Let this be your final thought. Our time
Okay.
is-
I'm on the steering committee of the Cuyahoga County Progressive Caucus. This evening at 6:30, we are having an expert panel on this subject. I know that each of you has been invited. It's at 6:30 this evening. I don't know how many of you intend to participate. I would like to urge you to do so. There is going to be an economics professor, Brad Humphreys, who has 20 years of research into sports facilities. He's an economist at the University of West Virginia. So I urge you, please, and please consider slowing this down and including the public in these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you now.
Keith Wilson.
Hi, my name is Keith Wilson. I'm also with the Progressive Caucus. The event tonight, I'm excited about because there was a lot of myths about deals like this. We heard one of them already today, that this is going to be an investment. And it makes a lot of sense. It's easy to understand why people believe this myth, because during games we see that the businesses fill up, and the restaurants and the bars. But since the 90s, economists have known that the promises of economic development and benefits simply don't pan out for cities. Another myth is that because the public owns these stadiums, it only makes sense for us to invest in them. When an entity owns a piece of capital, there's benefits and responsibilities. We've given the benefits, namely the profits, over to the owners of the teams, while we retain the responsibilities of maintenance and property tax. So these are a couple of the ideas that I as a layperson, can only understand to some extent. But if you come tonight, you could ask an economist who's been studying this to explain how, especially the first dynamic works. Properly understood, not as an investment, but as an expenditure for entertainment, it can be acceptable to invest. I shouldn't use that word. It can be acceptable to spend money on entertainment. Perhaps $25 million for a team would make sense. But we're looking at $285 million. And that's like saying going to a movie for $10 is a good expenditure. But would you go to a movie for $100? I think that there has to be a limit to how much money we pour into our entertainment budget. And I'd like to see us take a step back. I hope all of you will take the time to understand this dynamic, or at least to hear out the economists on this subject. Thank you.
Sally Hanley.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon to everybody. I want to say I love Cleveland. If you are a person of some means, Cleveland is a great city to live in. But we also know that Cleveland is one of the poorest cities in the country. And this really makes me wonder if spending this much money on Progressive Field makes sense with all of these unmet needs. I know that a previous speaker, talked about some of them, so many needs. And I really have to wonder that why would we be doing this for the team owner who is a billionaire? Somebody said $4.6 billion. And he's the one who will mostly be benefiting from all of the park upgrades. And also somebody brought up about why are we doing this now? Pretty soon we're going to have an election. It seems like it would make sense to let the new people who are going to be here have much more of a say on this. I guess that the lease doesn't expire until 2023, so there should not be a big rush. And when we're talking about spending this much money, and a lot of it from the city of Cleveland, which really has a lot of problems, I really think that we need to slow down and we need to think about what our priorities are, and if there isn't a better way to fund this than all of this money coming from the city and the county. Thank you.
Ann Caruso.
Hello, County Council, and thanks so much for the public comment period that you allow. I also feel sad that Cleveland, as one of the poorest cities, is considering, or the county is considering, giving so much money to what somebody just described as a luxury item. I do understand the draw that sports are. I do understand how there's a ripple effect throughout businesses. That's important. But at the same time, we have some of the poorest air quality in the country. We have, as I said before, we are the poorest city. I taught in Cleveland with poor families. Most of the families had parents who were working. The majority of them were working. They worked for the minimum wage, so they were very poor. I don't understand why certain groups come to the county council or city hall. They ask for some of this public money, and they aren't so readily given that money. We need affordable housing. We're desperate for it, not just in Cleveland. All over the country, we have given public money to luxury housing all over the place. It's happening now. You know, this is the same kind of thing. You go in poor neighborhoods, their sidewalks are crumbling, their curbs are crumbling. That has an effect on people to see everything around them in disrepair. That's public money, that's public spaces that should be taken care of. I have a question about this because I imagine we're considering doing this and it'll probably get, passed because we don't want the Guardians to leave Cleveland. It's kind of under the table, kind of a thing. I'm imagining that's why we will give this money. Do we have a guarantee the team is going to stay? People have said we get so many jobs. Can we have a guarantee what those jobs are, how much they're going to be? This is public money. I think there should be some oversight over it. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
William Tarter Jr.
Afternoon. I printed off copies of my public comment for all the council members if they'd like to read along. Good afternoon, Council President Jones, Vice President Stevens, County Executive Budish in his absence, and members of County Council. My name is William Tarter. I'm a resident of District 6. I'm speaking today as a citizen and as an advocate, and not representing my employer or any other civic organization. Before I begin my statement, I want to thank the administration for providing some helpful answers to my questions that I submitted last week. I received the responses yesterday afternoon, and I've been sorting through them and the implications of those responses ever since. Through the past few years, I have faithfully tried to educate myself and in turn educate others about the public funding mechanisms in place, as well as to call attention to the need for an avenue to address the long-term funding mechanisms needed around major capital repairs. Now, this legislation not only includes major capital repairs over $500,000, but now it also includes minor capital repairs under $500,000. It was my hope that my communication of this legislation would be in a different format, but with the time that I have, I will say this. As a citizen, I am extremely concerned about the short-term and the long-term details, particularly around revenue of this legislation. My concerns are not anti-sports or anti-billionaires, but as a person who is interested in how our tax dollars are being spent. It's my hope that by pursuing understanding of whose responsibility for what and when, and the funding source that can and will address it, will help alleviate issues down the road. I stand ready to meet with any county official, council, or administration, any organization, or any person at any point, at any time, to elaborate on the details of those concerns. Thank you, and God bless you.
Lou.
Good afternoon, everybody. Now, we have heard different people talking about the importance of this resolution. So somebody who will be considered nuisance, uneducated, is also here to give 2 cents. All county council members, actually, you already have received a video link to 2019 October 8th County Council General Meetings. With my public comments at that time, I was here to report my big trip for the so-called Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse grand opening. And that particular day was so fantastic Everybody got there to cheer for the new facility, new and improved for Cavaliers. So now, I'm here to say, I don't think anybody will go really against that we should have a nice facilities for our baseball team. Myself, I like baseball too, very much, since little. However, the thing is, our situation has been the same. Some people will come up here worrying if the sports team will leave, the professional sports team will leave, so they think that the public should support to have the facilities getting renovated or improved. That's not a wrong idea, but how the money should be spent, especially when it's the taxpayers' hard-earned money. I remember back in 2019 when we had all the meetings on that particular project for the basketball court. Warrensville Heights mayor came here. He had a very good point. He said, to tie up this deal, if we can also plug in our public service funding, which can get from the revenue through tax, through different ways, then it will be a very good deal. But unfortunately, I came up here 2 years ago, October 8th, to tell you how horrible that renovation actually was. You want to create a facility for everybody, but now it's still a facility only good for certain people enjoying beer. Oh, now they upgraded to cornea, $50 per glass. And with the horrible bathrooms, steep stairs, bad for seniors, bad for children, also people with disabilities. Not even mention I already have multiple injuries on my body parts falling apart. So do we want the same thing happen again to Jacobs Field or Progressive Field or whatever new name it will be? I think we have to not just think twice, we have to think thrice. If there's no way to make an investment really worth a while, spending that money is a total waste of public dollars. Please help us to defend our precious taxpayers' dollars. Don't waste them. We have lots of services needing these monies. Budgets, hearings are in session. Don't forget that. Thank you very much.
That concludes the public comment portion of today's meeting.
Thank you, Andrea. At this time, let's continue with our presentation. Do we have our next speaker? Yes.
Good afternoon, President Jones, Vice President Stevens, and other councilmen and women. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm here to just give you a short introduction, hopefully, of Gateway's roles. Okay. Yes, sorry. My name is Daniela Nunnally. I'm the Chief of Staff currently at Gateway Economic Development Corporation. And I've, over the last couple years, have been trying to head up the diversity and inclusion pieces and parts of recording and how we do that. So if I could give you an overview of how Gateway has evolved over the last few years on diversity and inclusion, that's kind of what I'm going to do. Vice President Stevens, I know you asked for a couple comprehensives, 3 to 5 years. I had to go back a little bit further just due to the COVID years and some of those items. So I'm just going to start with going back to 2015, where we started 3 large-scale projects at the ballpark totaling $40 million. You can see at the top 3 pieces here. These were different phases over the course of 2014 through 2017. These were the contract amounts of $23 million for phase 1. We had $4.6 million spent on minority companies, $2 million spent in female, and about $910,000 spent in Cleveland small business or just small business enterprises. Our percentages that rounded out those numbers in the red there are our final totals on those projects. So you can see in the beginning we had, again, our goals are 15, 7, and 8. That equals 30% minority participation. Phase 2 with alterations, that was a $12 million contract. We ended up with 15% minority, 11% female, and 25% small business. And then we rounded out, finishing off Phase 3, which is 3.9 million, at 19% minority, 16% female, and 15% small business. I do want to say that this is just the economic inclusion on this piece. Gateway, from that point, was not equipped to handle the diversity workforce part of that. I will say personally, I thought that I had to track all of those numbers because each and every single one of these dollars I tracked. As we grew, we understood that a lot of the businesses, the project managers, everybody else was able to track those through the project manager or the CM on the job and those types of things. So when, I'll just say when Mr. Ken Silliman was seated as our board chair in 2018, he really encouraged us to dig deeper into that workforce participation. So then at the end of 2018, we shifted our RFPs and contracts to include all of those good faith efforts as well. And then in 2018, as you know, we jumped off into the Field House's transformation project, which was a great set off of new challenges for us. And I believe we really developed a good model, which is what I'd like to talk about today as well, for how we might track and work on those inclusion numbers for progressive fields renovations and those types of things. So the next,
Mr. Chairman, before she goes to the next section,
go ahead.
Could I ask her to do a point of clarification for us? These dollar amounts, were these what we consider prime contractors or subcontractors, or was it a combination of both?
It was a combination. Both prime and subcontractors are totaled in those dollars. If a prime was selected, each prime got the same charge. This is our goals. You have to compete these for each of the subcontracts too. So when a prime submits to us a bid, I'll say, they have to fill out their intent for each and every single subcontractors, what they're looking at, who they're looking to get diversity and inclusion from.
And then in the second phase, we see that 25% went to CSB SBEs. Were any of those also minority or female businesses?
No.
Okay. So there's no duplication in any of the three categories?
Not in those. You will see that come the transformation project. That was something that we decided, and I'll explain that here in a few moments if that's okay. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The next slide, I believe. Oh, sorry. Okay. How we reported and tracked for the transformation project, we had quite a big project here. And so just to explain how this came to being, before the project even started, Gateway, the Field House, had a roundtable with city and county council members to discuss their opinions on goals and what was important to them as representatives of the city and county. We then sat down and negotiated numbers and settled on percentages that we felt were still challenging but attainable. So we came up with our economic inclusion numbers, which include the small business, female, minority, and then the prevailing wage to workers and union wage. And then we also did, again, as we started to look into the workforce inclusion, we discussed the minority, female, Cuyahoga County, City of Cleveland, and then of the City of Cleveland, the low-income persons defined in Chapter 188 of the City of Cleveland Ordinance. So when we look through this packet, this is something that was produced every time the numbers were updated. This is something that was given out, and then this one that you're looking at here today was the final overview of the whole summary of what we were looking at. So the first page just kind of went over our objective, and that was just to reiterate our goals. The second piece of this was to come up with the diversity basis of construction calculation. This means that there are exempt contracts. When you look at a project this big, you have things such as, if you're looking at the field house, that metal interior screen that runs by them that is a specialty package. You have elevators, escalators, food equipment services, generally just a straight buy through. So those types of things that totaled about 8.1 million came up with our diversity basis of construction, which was $121 million. Our next graph looks at the total contracts awarded. It was, again, as we spoke in the first slide, totaled $121 million. Of that, 58% or $70 million went to diversity companies. The graph down there just shows too, again, the majority contracted was 42%, and then again, the diversity numbers were at 58%. To the next slide, we discussed and always put in our economic diversity in here. We have our goals in the blue there, and then at that point, and then again at the end of this project, this was the total contracts that we had represented. So minority, we ended up with 16%, FBE 21%, and small business was at 50%. And Vice Chair Stevens, this kind of gets to your question on how does this get tracked. A lot of these companies had more than one classification when it comes down to whether they were a minority or a female. We tracked each company not based on where we needed the check mark to fill a category, but each company individually. So each of these graphs represents a company as a whole and for that whole certification. So the minority breakdown for the total contracts, 19 million, and about 16% of the total contracts went to minority companies here. Of those 121 million, the female contracting on this was $26 million, total of 21% on the project. Again, that means that the female could have had small or minority with their certifications as well. So again, these count as each, not on the whole. So the dollars, even though the dollars are not duplicated, I just want to make that known, the dollars aren't duplicated, it's just for that whole set of goals there. And then this, yes. 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 It's not, it's not that their head count is too small, it's that we wanted to see fully where the dollars were going and not, in years past, I'll just say that we were looking at companies and we're like, okay, they have minority and small business, but which aisle do we need to fill to meet our quotas? And from that, we had each company just submit to us and to see where, you know, if they just had small business or if they just had female or if they just had minority, where would they fit? We didn't want to put them in a box, so she would be considered in the full count in minority, full count in female, and full count in small business, just to look at the dollars.
So if you spent $5 million with her, it would show up in all three categories? Okay.
Yes.
We want to make sure of that because that doesn't give, in some ways, it doesn't give us a true number on the impact in the community because it really is only in the community one time.
Yeah, we understand that. We actually, when we were going through this project too, we had a part in it where we discussed with the city and county. We had one person from the county, one person from the city come and sit with us. We had from the city, Dr. Melissa Burrows. From the county, we had, first it was Mr. Luis Cartagena, and then it switched over to Miss Janae Hill, Holly, my bad. And so we had from those points on, we discussed with them that this is what we were going to be doing, and we were kind of all on the same page. Moving forward, it would be great to understand how do we fit all those people appropriately into, I don't want to say their box, but that's really what we're kind of doing. So we did want to see where each of the dollars were spent, and so that's kind of how we discussed it and worked on it through that grouping that we all sat with.
Thank you.
And then so we broke down these even further. So of the minority businesses that were contracted, that was that $19 million. We saw 48% was African American and the other 52% was to Hispanic contracts, and the dollars amounts there. We had no other minorities divulged on that. And then in the female minority contracting breakout, we saw that 22% of those fit the female minority dollars and numbers there. And then of the minority contracts, that 19 million, let's see, 79% of those also qualified as small business as well. And then we started our work on the workforce diversity participation. As we got through and established our small team, again, we decided with the city and county to start reporting on these. And then we came up with project goals and actuals. I know at one point we sat around with city and council members to discuss, and I don't know if negotiate's the right word, but we came up with percentages that we felt were achievable, but at the same time would help press us a little bit. You can see in that center column, the project goal was 16%, 5%, 25%, 20, and 3. So those are different than some of the numbers that are laid out in other projects you may have seen around the city and county as well. And then our actuals came in at 21% minority workforce, 5% female workforce, 51% Cuyahoga County, 19% City of Cleveland, so we were a percentage shy on that. And then of that 19%, 4% qualified for the low income of Cleveland. And then just the hours show you in the next couple slides. I'm not going to talk through each one of those, but those just show you the hours and how we got to those percentages. So as we went through, I just discussed too how we went and came up with that team. We did decide that there was going to be meetings approximately monthly on the field house project, and how that would go. We did move those meetings to end up being quarterly. There just weren't enough pay apps coming through as a whole to warrant meeting. But I believe that it worked very well with us having a representative of the city and county work alongside with us to field questions, to help us move along, make sure that they knew that we knew their concerns and vice versa. And then we went to, and really that was the final piece of the field house project. Our goal, again, was just to, I believe, move forward. We really liked how this report was done. The graphs and papers that you see here, those were done by Whiting Turner, and they did a really phenomenal job, again, of having those programs to track all of those numbers, which was really beneficial to us, because I would not have been able to do that on my own. So, and then if I could get it switched back to the other one real quick. At the bottom. I just wanted to go over a current item that we're working on too. I do have more projects that I can get to anybody. A lot of those would have been specialty items, like we just put outdoor escalators into the field house. You know, you've got 5 companies in the whole nation that do that type of work. And so when we do those types of projects, they bring a national team with them. It's really not something that we draw inside people with. So I have those numbers. We always, again, tell them, the prime, to please try and sub out and get local deliveries, fencing, protection, concrete, items like that. So we try, and we always put that again in our contracts, but sometimes it proves a little more difficult. And so
I'll just add, when the county did our disparity study, we realized there was no racial disparity in areas where you have no minority industry. And as you said, the elevators, escalators, that was 1.5 in the country, minimal minority participation in that, and that it is a non-issue when the industry doesn't exist.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On that point, it appears that your approach is kind of all or nothing. It's either that there's no minority participation in that industry, or else it's within your base diversity contract amount, and it is included. But when the county has done its disparity studies, we looked at particular industries and found that the availability of minority contractors, for example, would be significantly greater in some industries than other industries. And so in doing work in those areas where there's a lot of availability, well, we'd set higher goals that reflect the availability as opposed to other areas where there's lower availability. And so my question is whether you've given any thought to trying to tailor the goals to the individual industries or kind of work that you're doing, rather than having a single set of percentages that you're applying pretty much across the board.
Yes, that is something that we've discussed moving forward, that each and every project that we're going to be touching, we'll have a sit down and a discussion based on what does the current trends look like, what is the economy looking like. You know, there's a lot of things, supplies and workforce, that are very difficult at this stage to get. You know, I've got work going on at at the field house, and they're having a real struggle finding workforce. You know, they call the hall for 4 people, only 2 show up. So there's very real issues there. The thing when we had with the field house that was a good issue to have during their transformation project is everybody was busy. The good news was there is that everybody had work to do in 2018 and beginning, 2017, 18, and beginning of 19 as well, when we were going through that before COVID hit. And there was a struggle just to get participation from other businesses and I'll say workforce as well, because the numbers were good. You had Cleveland Clinic doing work, you had CMSD, you had just a lot of big projects happening. But we are not going to scale back. I'll say we can look at each project moving forward. I don't know how the numbers will look, and they could be totally different for any renovations that we do at the ballpark, and that can all be discussed. We're open to discussion on those points. I should say the economic inclusion generally stays the same, but the workforce we can look at as well. But we're open to discussion on that. As far as, I was just going to mention really quickly, the field house is working right now on a couple bars and overlook items that are a little bit of a continuation from the transformation, but with some of their own dollars. But I just wanted you to show, I just wanted to show you on those numbers that we do have the economic inclusion and workforce diversity that we are still pushing for and shooting for on that. And those are our numbers. Again, they're in red of the percentages, and then the bottom lines was the goals. So we're pretty happy with the work that's being done there right now. And that's really, I'll take any other questions that anybody might have at this point.
Further questions? Cheryl?
Excuse me if I just had a memory lapse. Are you guys doing this prevailing wage?
Most of our contracts are all unions, so it's really not been an issue for us. So it is something that we consider, but it's all of our contracts.
Well, I heard you say a minute ago we call the hall, or the contractor call the hall.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm asking. It's prevailing wage, it's union in general.
Yes.
Unless it's a specialty.
You know, I'm not sure like what they did with the different art pieces that they installed. That's really the one that's on the top of my head that I'm unaware of, but I can get that information. I don't know how you would grade art and pay for that. So
Usually, they're usually it's a whole different field of installing art. You can't just use anybody because they can destroy the value of artwork when you're installing it if you don't do it correctly.
Understood, yes.
I do want to add that going forward, a very important part of our process, Daniela spoke to this, is that project by project, we work with the point person, your staff point person, and the city staff person, whoever that might be at the moment. So as I was listening to Councilman Miller's points about what the county diversity study showed and different approaches going forward, my best suggestion to you as the council is to make sure that your staff person has your latest thinking on these kind of questions, because we infrequently appear before you as a whole council. But we can and we do engage your staff people round the clock, project by project. So as long as your staff has your latest thinking, you can assume that Daniela will draw upon that and draw upon the city department head as well, so that we are accomplishing your latest thinking, not by appearing before you, but rather by engaging your staff person and getting their thoughts and their recommendations as to what you want. So I think that's critical going forward, is as long as you make sure your staff person has your thinking, we will accommodate it.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Ken. As you know, Luis Cartagena and Janae, they have been recent individuals, but we now have Lenore Lockett, who is the director of our diversity department, and she may have a representative, if not herself particularly, so we want to make sure you are connected with that right person.
Right. And actually, this is a good place to add another point here. At the previous meeting, you heard the team, the Indians, describe that they had just hired a new director of diversity. Going forward with both the Indians, with the Guardians, and the Cavaliers, we're going to rely heavily on those positions within the team's organization. Daniela does an awesome job with all the volume of information that comes in, but given that we're now looking at least a $202.5 million project coupled with annual capital repairs and continuing needs at the field house, it becomes critically important for the team heads to kind of get the information so that we don't have to add a staff person at Gateway, which we're trying to control costs there as well. So that's another important point going forward, is for the teams to really engage. And so far, as you know, the Indians have been very clear that by hiring for this position, that they're kind of a pace setter in Major League Baseball, and we want to draw on that pace-setting categorization so that we can get the full benefit on these projects.
Does Major League Baseball have any preferred contractors? That is any of that built into any of the work that gets done?
Internally at their facility, that they can comment on that. I'm unaware of their personal operations.
Councilmember Jones, can you
Councilwoman
speak
Stevens.
louder into the microphone?
I
Can the
will
council
speak up.
members? Thank you.
Right.
Before you leave, one of the things that I am concerned about, and I hope that you can answer, is the range of wages. If it's prevailing wage / union, what is the lowest pay scale? For example, the laborer that cleans. What's the highest pay scale, which is typically someone who is an operator of some type of machinery?
Vice President Stevens, I would assume that the hall can give us that information, and then our primes would work on that, but that's something that we can look at, and I can get a list of, just so we know what those are. I'm unaware of the dollars and cents on individuals.
Okay. Usually as you know, there's a schedule, and so if you could have them tell you what the lowest person on the totem pole makes, the apprentice / laborer, that person, and then as well as what piece is at the top of the scale and what that range is, because that's incredibly important to our constituents. The range of opportunities that come with these types of projects, we need to know about.
Understood. So as, to clarify that, then you would want to know like an entry level too, where are entry level folks starting to?
Yes.
Okay. Understood.
Councilwoman Simon?
Thank you. Thank you, Janella, and the work you did on the answers to Vice President's question. This is not necessarily related to the diversity, but I can't stay. But the question that I have, I think for Council President and colleagues is there any reason we wouldn't want to hear from an alternative economist talking about the spillover effect of having the guardians remain here? We always hear from stakeholders, and I appreciate all of that. I've always been supportive of keeping the teams here, understanding the economic impact from that perspective. But would it really be helpful perhaps to hear a different perspective in front of us? I'm just throwing that out there. You don't need to answer now, but I can't make tonight's meeting. But I would be interested, I guess I'll watch it, but I just always wonder, why aren't we hearing from a different perspective? All we hear is from people with a stake in the outcome. And this isn't about billionaires, by the way. It's not about the Dolans. It's about the community in Cleveland and the county. But I'd like to hear a different perspective, and if the colleagues don't want to hear it, that's fine. But I just wanted to put that out there, and thank you for your work on this.
Through the president to Councilwoman Simon. This is something, I'm glad you asked this question. And those of us who are involved in working on sports facilities, there's been a change over the last 20 years in terms of how you document these projects and how you justify these projects. Back 20 years ago and before, it was pretty common when Gateway or a public sector person would try to justify a sports facility, is that they would submit an economic impact study. And these economic impact studies would consider both direct and indirect spin-off benefits from the sports facility. And these economic impact studies, which were pretty popular back in the 90s, would significantly overstate the case for a public subsidy. And many economists, starting in the mid-90s and ever since, have done study after study after study and concluded that in terms of justifying these projects via economic spin-off, that the justifications aren't there. And I know enough about the professor that's going to be appearing in the Progressive Caucus event tonight, is that I'm pretty sure he's going to debunk these kind of approaches as well. You did not hear us making those kind of arguments before you. We did have many representatives from the public give a personal small business, or in some case big business, response to the impact of the facility. But we're not trying to make one of those kind of arguments before you. About pretty much with the Gateway project, the approach shifted from an economic impact, import, output, ancillary benefits, push that aside. With Gateway and several other projects, San Diego's Petco Park is another good example, the approach changed, the public approach changed. With Gateway, we had a desolate city neighborhood right on the verge of downtown. And there's a great photo of what the Central Market area looked like in 1989. It was basically like one building immersed in a sea of parking lots. The approach of Gateway was, can we use the year-round attraction, not just summer with the baseball team, but summer with the baseball team in an arena year-round, to drive a constant daily, weekly crowd of people that can regenerate an urban neighborhood. And you've heard Tom Yablonsky, who has leadership on the historic Gateway neighborhood, describe to you the effects. There's a study done in the American Planning Association Journal back in 2004 that makes that case. Compare Gateway to Camden Yards in Baltimore and say Gateway was an unqualified success in redeveloping an urban neighborhood. So as far as the economic impact, we're not trying to go down that road. We're not trying to say, as they did in the 80s and 90s, well, for every dollar that a tourist brings to town and the tourist spends the dollar here and that has a multiple, we're not going there. We're not making that argument. We're simply saying that these two facilities side by side completely regenerated a city neighborhood. The taxes that all those businesses on East 4th and up on Prospect and Huron, they pay, those are real taxes that come to you. And we're saying that this, keeping these facilities keeps that neighborhood alive and producing benefits. And if we needed a test for that, COVID gave us that, because look what happened when over the last 2020 and small business closures and that sort of thing. So if there's one point I can make on this topic is we're not trying to sell this the way sponsors tried to sell it in the 80s and 90s. That's yesterday's arguments. We're different. We were tailored to Cleveland. We think we made a difference in Cleveland. And we are saying that as far as the facility itself, it's good, sound financial management to prolong its useful life so you don't do what cities like in Atlanta and Arlington do and replace billion-dollar facilities every 20 years.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Are there any questions? And again, this is beyond just the minority participation, but on the project as a whole. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
Chair, I do have some questions. I don't know if
Yes.
it's appropriate time.
This is the time.
Great, thanks. Just on the last comment that was made, there was a economic impact given to us that explained that Progressive Field contributes directly to the local economy. And it does give those kind of numbers, I think, that you were saying you were getting away from. It does, although, go into greater detail of what else it does, you know, contributing to organizations and bringing in people, but, you know, generating 108 million of direct spending, draws visitors, contributing 215 million. I think you were, am I incorrect, or was that page kind of showing that there is a direct money impact for what we're getting in return?
Through Council President to Councilwoman Baker, yes, you are referring to a slide in the team presentation, specifically Christy Corfius, who's here today, did that slide, and the numbers you're quoting are correct. But I think she said at the time, and she would probably clarify today as well, that she didn't take this kind of, you know, spin-off economic approach that was so popular back in the 80s and 90s, and that probably the West Virginia professor is going to critique tonight. She focused on direct spending, things that are absolutely documented, not this person spends this, and then the person they spent money on spent money here, and then that person spent none of that. Am I correct, Christy? And she was speaking to just the team expenditures, what the visitors spend, you know, hotel, restaurants, that type of thing. So the numbers she gave are more direct and less remote than some of these studies that I'm referencing.
Okay, I appreciate that. It just sounded like that was similar to what you were saying we weren't doing. and yet I had the economic impact, but I understand the explanation you just gave.
It's a difference between indirect and spin-off, and we're not doing the latter. We are, if we can directly and a good example of that, she also had on that same slide, how much in just taxes that the county collects each year and that the city collects it. So in terms of our reporting, we really try to focus on the direct and not get into the indirect.
Good. Well, thank you for that. Explains it. I have a couple of questions on the term sheet, if I may.
Yeah.
All right. So, and maybe, I'm not sure if you're gonna, if you will answer this, but there was one question on the sports facility reserve from 2021 to 2023. Will the sports facility fund continue? And is that the $2 million a year that we are going to be contributing? Is that part of the sports facility reserve, I should call it?
Through the president to Councilwoman Baker, there were actually two distinct sports facility reserves created back when you did the Q deal in 2017. There is what we call the county sports facility reserve.
Right.
And that is in effect as we speak and has been generating odd increments each year, but somewhere in the like 800,000 to maybe $1.5 million per year. And that continues through 2023. And as to your question about whether that is how that figures into the county contributions, the part of the county sports facility reserve that's available is one of the one-time money sources that the county's contributed.
At 2,250,000.
No, it's not, that's separate and apart.
Okay.
But you'll note that in the term sheet, I think it's on page 2, there's a listing
Right.
of the one-time monies.
Right.
And one of those is the county, what's left of the county sports facility reserve. Now, keep in mind that back in the summer of 2020, your council approved a $3.5 million payment to the Indians, which they had already spent money on things, and your source for that, I believe, was the county sports facility reserve. So you already took 3.5 for that back in 2020. What's going to be left over? What's left over from that and what accumulates between now and 2023 is reflected in the one-time source that's shown on the term sheet.
And that one-time source, if I'm reading it correctly on page 2, is $2,250,000 from county account of sports facility reserve.
Yes, okay, I may have misunderstood. There's also a county 2.55, and I probably misunderstood. Yes, and Bob's here to speak to that.
The 2.55 is right now listed as general fund.
Yes.
And I guess that's where my question was going. When the one-time money is contributed through the sports facility reserve, does the then annual contribution of 2.55 go start a new sports facility reserve? Is that how we're managing that? Or does that sports facility reserve just go away once we have made that one-time contribution?
Councilwoman Baker, the Sports Facility Improvement Fund that what you're talking about, that was established in 2017 as part of the transformation deal, that stays in effect.
Okay.
And the agreements that will be drafted for this deal will send that money to this deal. So, and then what Ken was referring to before about there's a county account and a city account.
Right.
The city account, there's no money in there until beginning in 2024.
Right?
And as long as there's an agreement here, that money then flows to this agreement, this overall transaction.
So it'll be one pot of money that it all flows into.
And the way we've structured the financing is all of that money flows annually, flows to fund debt service first, and then after debt service is funded, to the capital repair fund.
Just wanted to see how that worked. Okay, that's helpful. I have a second question, if I may. The syntax is a 2.5 million. And I believe it's reported, but I'm pretty sure it was reported, that if that does run short, that comes out of the general fund. Am I correct in that?
Councilwoman Baker, the 2.5 million of the sin tax, if that falls short,
Yes.
there's no guarantee of that. So there's no direct back line, or there's no direct line back to the county's general fund for that funding.
So if it's short, say we only are able to contribute 2 million, given it's a sin tax, and who knows over the next 15 years, if that diminishes in return because of how that is created through smoking and alcohol and things like that. So what happens if we're short? How do we make up the extra 500,000 if only 2 million can be contributed?
Well, there's a series, so they're long way short. There should be a lot of money in the reserve up front from the various funds and how the cash flows work. So we're kind of mitigating risk that way. The other way we're mitigating the risk is we're projecting sin tax, and as we have for a long time now, we're projecting sin tax to go down, even though it's gone up over the past 2 years. So we're projecting that to go down. We're actually, because we actually experienced some growth, we're actually accelerating that decrease by more. So we're hopeful that we are conservative in that light. The money that flows into the reserve, the capital reserve, we feel is sufficient for the needs. But if there is a shortfall, we would have to kind of discuss and come up with a plan for that shortfall.
So is it written anywhere where if there was a shortfall, what that discussion would look like, or who would be responsible? Or, I mean, it doesn't sound like, I mean, how do we know in 10 years when none of us, or at least myself, may not be here anymore? How do we know that we have the capacity to be able to pay? I mean, it wasn't long ago where we had a pretty thin budget. Where does that come from? What is the answer? What is the, I mean, it can't be just we'll talk about it if it happens. And there has to be a.
Through the president to Councilwoman Baker, as Bob explained in his previous testimony, all these funding sources from the city and the county go into a trust account held by Huntington. And the first thing Huntington does with that money is to pay the debt service. As Bob also testified, that he's been pretty conservative on the sin tax and on other, the bed tax and everything. So those are conservative estimates. But if they come up short, where it will show up in our agreement is not on the debt service side, because there's plenty of money to cover the debt service. But where it'll show up is that the excess after debt service will be less than we predicted, and that will impact capital repairs. Now, on the capital repair side of things, we're assuming our model shows that we'll have about $8 million a year to go towards capital repairs. But our facility assessment, which we've given you copies of, shows that the needs by the year 2036, the last year of our initial lease term, are for 99 million. So we right off the bat have at least, at minimum, a $15 million reserve for the capital repair account to deal with situations just like Bob said, where if something comes up short on the revenue side,
Right.
that reserve is also there if some of the costs that we projected in the facility study turn out to be low and the actual costs are higher. That's what that reserve is for.
Okay.
Now, if you blow through all of that, which is a possibility, hopefully not a strong possibility, but a possibility, then the situation is that Gateway is committed through the lease to cover all capital repairs for the ballpark. So you could have a situation in the future where Gateway is legally responsible for something, and from the resources that you're considering today, there isn't enough money to handle it. And that, we don't have a crystal ball as to when that might occur, if it occurs. It will touch off a discussion amongst your council and amongst the city council as to how to backstop Gateway at that time. And it'll be, I'm sure, whatever the economic conditions are at the time will dictate which sources on the county side or the city side or some combination of both you use to make up for that shortfall.
Okay, so in the negotiations that we made in this deal, when we put things like the sin tax and the bed tax as part of somewhat guarantees that we will contribute so much money, and both of those are variable. I think even on the term sheet, it's listed as a variable form of funding. You feel that the county is protected in that worst-case scenario, that we will not be caught in, say, we go through a recession or a very, difficult time out there and not doing as well as we are today, or relatively speaking?
Through the president to Councilwoman Baker, I would be reckless if I made that statement to you today. I can tell you that we, as Bob has indicated, we've been very conservative in our projections and hopeful that those kind of scenarios do not develop. But I cannot, I would be misleading you if I said you are protected or you are secure. That's not the case. There is a risk factor there, hopefully one that we've minimized, but there's a risk factor at the county council and at the city council if these various variable sources don't track out. But again, we've been as conservative as we can in projecting them.
All right, if I may, the bed tax too, the yearly contribution is $3 million. Again, that's the same scenario. If we went into a recession, hotels aren't booking, we find that we are in a contract to pay $3 million a year, that too is going to be, with all the other resources exhausted, this is a 15-year lease, we then will be responsible for that $3 million, whether it's paid by bed tax or not. Is that fair to say?
Councilwoman Baker, the $3 million is, it's labeled as a variable. If it's 1 million, it's 1 million. If it's 5 million, it's 3 million. So it's
Really?
not a same thing as the sin tax. It's not a guaranteed revenue stream from the county. It is what is there will flow through the structure as we've constructed it.
So there will not be a shortage on our end if the worst-case scenarios should happen and we cannot contribute $3 million of the bed tax or $2.5 million of the sin tax. you will, if I just heard you correctly, you only take what we have to offer? If it's, it didn't sound right, but that's how it came out.
Through the president to Councilwoman Baker. Yes, as Bob testified, the bed tax is in there as a variable item on the term sheet.
Right.
But if it comes up short, it will eventually play out on the capital repair side of things. And Gateway, if it's short enough that it blows through the reserve as well, then Gateway will still have the obligation to do those capital repairs as they come due.
Right.
And it will not have a funding source for them.
That's right.
So Gateway will be in the position of looking to the city and looking to the county and asking and basically saying, help.
Right. Or basically saying you are obligated per the term lease that we all agreed to. Isn't that more the case?
So we're splitting hairs here, but technically the county, and Bob, correct me if I think this is in sync with what you said. If that scenario developed, the county would not be obligated per the term sheet because the county is saying syntax estimated at 3 million and variable. It would not be, Gateway would not be coming to the county and say you breached an obligation. The county didn't breach an obligation. But instead, Gateway will be coming through, you may not have breached an obligation, but
You'll be
Gateway doesn't have the money to pay for this capital repair, and we don't have any independent revenue source. County, city, we don't care who it is. You can flip a coin if you want, but Gateway will be in default of the lease, not the county, not the city. The lease is between Gateway and the team. Gateway will be in default, and the only way it gets out of default is if some money comes from somewhere, someone to make it up.
Okay. Well, those are both good to know. I know it is worst case scenario, but I would think you'd always have to look at that anytime you sign a contract and what our obligations are if we were short. And I understand your point that if we didn't have it and we were short and it shows on paper we're just short, we can't come up with the 3 million. We can come up with 2 million, but not 3. You'll be short in those repairs. That visit from you is where we will dig these papers out and review what it is what we signed back in 2021 and probably haggle over it at that time. But I understand what you're saying, and thank you for that explanation. The only last question I had as far as the term sheet goes is that the 15-year lease will end in 2036, and the syntax, unless it's renewed, ends in 2034. So we have 2 years before the lease ends that we need to cover those final 2 years. How is that figured into? I would imagine, I think it's about 5 million.
Through the president to Councilwoman Baker, you'll see on the term sheet on page 2
right,
that there's an asterisk that references several of the sources don't carry through the full lease term.
Okay.
The way those are made up is basically the one-time money. The one-time money does 2 things. It ups the annual amount from, I think there's a total on that sheet of
2.5.
If you total the annual revenue sources, it comes up to like 18.3.
Right, it does, yes.
The one-time money does 2 things. If you throw the one-time money in there, it brings that 18.3 up to 19 million a year, and it also fills those gaps.
Okay, so you amortized it
Yes.
over a shorter period of time. Yes. Got it. I didn't know that. I mean, that's the first I've heard that you did it that way, which makes sense. Okay, those were my questions on the term sheet, and I appreciate the explanations you gave back.
Councilman Schron? Yes, Councilman Baker asked a number of the questions I was going to ask, but the, on the bed tax, it looks pretty obvious that we're not going to be there. At least it seems that way to me. From, our high water mark was with the RNC. 2019 was another high water mark, and we're using those as our benchmarks. And I'm not sure what I'm missing, but I don't see a whole flood of people coming into our hotels and our beds, and we're actually losing hotel space. How can we in good faith say that we're going to get to the numbers of 2019 for these projections in our current, on the bed tax?
Councilman, it's a good question. It's, what we've done is, we've started off with where we're at today. So the 3 million isn't 3 million beginning in 2022. The 3 million is kind of the stabilized number that we are projecting to get to in 2025. So we kind of increase it incrementally to get there, in accordance with what all the industry experts are saying about the recovery from 2020.
I get that we will be there by then, but you got holes in years 22, 23, 24, until you get to 25 that you got to make up, don't you? In the way you've got that forecasted?
Well, the way we've structured the cash flows, there's some, if we didn't have any bed tax up front, yes, there would be a gap. And we have some bed tax, and it's growing to the 3 million. But the one-time sources and the way that the bonds are structured provides funding for capital repairs. So we're funding more up front for capital repairs to allow for that front-end gap, if you will.
The other thing I heard repeated numerous times was that there's only two sources of funding, the city or the county. And up until this point, there's a third source, and that's the team for those amounts below $500,000. Is that not a change in those kind of improvements that they were responsible for up to this point?
Through the president to Councilman Schwan, you were not at a prior meeting where we explained that one of the elements of this new agreement is that Gateway will be taking all capital repairs. That
No,
was,
I heard it, but so don't, yeah. But, so that's what this agreement is, but that's what this board is here to listen to and to strike what's in the best interest of everyone, our taxpayers and everybody.
well, through the president, I can only speak to what our proposed agreement says. What our proposed agreement says is that Gateway, going forward, will be responsible for all capital repairs, and if in the future Gateway is not able to meet that obligation, the team would be entitled to hold Gateway in default. Now, your point was, well, couldn't the team step forward in the event of capital repair shortages in the future? But we did not negotiate that term. That's not in the agreement. Now, you as a council could change the agreement, and whether the team would accept that or not is speculative. But the questions I'm answering to this council is based on the agreement that we are submitting to you. If council wants to change that, then you reopen the negotiation with the teams, and it's not for me to say what the team would do or wouldn't do.
Okay, but that provision is up to this point has been a shared responsibility until this agreement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So this is the change that you were asking us to accept.
Yes.
That you're negotiated on behalf of the county, that you have changed a provision that for the last 20-plus years has been a shared responsibility that said below a certain level, the team was responsible. Above that certain level, these other bodies picked up the responsibility.
That's correct.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clearly understanding it is not as though I'm asking something that's different than what we've been doing for 25 years.
No, that's correct.
And so you're saying that if we were to ask for to be just that one provision to be kept in total, that we might risk this negotiation, is what you're suggesting. If we put ourselves in the exact same position with just that one provision, which helps to buffer some of the risks that you were worried about, that would put this in jeopardy.
Through the president to Councilman Schwan, I can't speak for the team.
No, and I'm not asking you to.
But what I can tell you is that there is a reason that our first discussion with the team was in September of 2019, and we didn't reach agreement until July of 2021. I'm not going to get into all the history of the back and forth and what we tried to negotiate and what the team tried to negotiate, but I can tell you that we certainly anticipated that question that you're asking today and tried to negotiate on that point. And the fact that we're here today not having achieved it, you can probably surmise what the outcome was.
But the negotiations achieved an awful lot of other components to it that seemed to be very favorable to the team and to everyone else in regards to that, but unless I'm missing that point.
Through the president to Councilman Schwan, unless and until the United States Congress legislates on this subject in a way that meaningfully changes the ground rules of these kind of discussions and lessens the power of the respective sports leagues to pit one city against the other at the risk of losing its sports franchise, these kind of discussions will remain difficult in Cleveland, in Baltimore, in Buffalo, and in Oakland, and everywhere else that these things come up. The fact is that under the present legal environment, the leverage of cities and counties is minimal. Unless you're willing to lose your team.
So you're saying that that was the first time this question has been asked in the entire process between this body? That's what I thought I heard. My asking to return that one component of all the multiple components, that was the first time you heard that question come up out of this body?
My memory may be not complete, but I believe it's the first time.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, Councilwoman Nan Baker.
Thank you. And this is a team question, so we're away from the term sheet. I know we're going to be wrapping up here, so I just want to see before we take our vote of what your work has been on the family team passes that we talked about the last couple of times that you were here. Who would be addressing that? I received, and actually everyone has received, a focus on families. And we were talking about perhaps doing a little more than what we have been doing for families to come and encourage them to bring their family, as we said, for the love of the game. And many of our families particularly the taxpayers who are supporting this today, can't bring their family of 4 or 5. I mean, we're looking at $100, $150, $200, especially when you enter into something to eat and drink and maybe some sports things, who knows. So I see that you had some off-season research for 2022 family offers. Can you expand a little bit more on that and what your thoughts are and what you may do for the families in 2022?
Good afternoon, President Jones, Vice President Stevens, members of council, and Councilmember Baker. Are you okay if I go through a quick presentation, or do you want a direct response to that question?
I know what my questions are. If we have time to go through it, that's the only question I'm really going to have at the end. So if you'd like to go through it, I did read it, and it's impressive, and I like all of the improvements that you've made and the focus on family. My only point is that if they can't walk through the door, they'll never see it. So, but I'm not in chair. It's up to you if you'd like to have that presentation. I don't think it'll be very long.
If we're able to answer Nan Baker's question, I'd actually like if we could answer her question.
Sounds good. Through the president to Councilmember Baker.
Excuse me, can you state your name for the record?
Sorry, this is Alex King.
Thank you.
I lead marketing for the organization. I've been with the team for about 10 years. So to answer your question, we've really took your questions and input and feedback to heart in the last couple committee of the whole meetings and spent some time in our off-season planning, and we're early in it, but we're really looking at evaluating 3 different ticket offers, to your point on ensuring we have the right amount of value for our fans and families in particular. And the 3 that we're looking at is really building and improving the value we have for special kids ticket offer. So that's an offer we have existing where kids can get in with their parents for $10 to $15 on a fixed price, and we're looking to improve that to somewhere between $7 and $10 per ticket. I think the second ticket offer is probably one that we're going to expand a lot and really put a lot of time and effort into, and that's looking at a family value ticket where we have 4 tickets plus loaded value. So we tested this option in 2021 where we had 4 tickets in the upper reserved for $100, and that included the tickets, but it also included $40 of loaded value. So that loaded value can be used on merchandise, it can be used on food and beverage. And the idea there is we want to provide certainty for families and sort of an all-in price that they know when they're coming to the game, that's the amount that they're going to spend. And I think this off-season, we want to look at really different price combinations of what's the ticket price going to be, but also how much loaded value we'll provide. And then the last piece that we're looking at is really directly to your question, and that's just looking at what's the right entry-level price point we should have for families. If we look at Sundays, which are primarily a day for families where kids and their parents come, we want to make sure that we look at a very attractive entry-level price point for families in those timeframes. So we are very much committed, and we heard your feedback, and we want to make sure we take this off-season to get that value equation right.
Well, thank you very much for listening, and I did read these over, and I am impressed by your suggestions. You do have 80-plus games. How many home games do you have?
81.
81. So 81 games, if you could factor into your formulas here, not just 1 or 2 times a family may come, but how many times can they afford to come? If the price of their family is $100 every time they come, they may not come too often. So if you want to fill your stadium with families on Sunday, you may want to lower that even more just to show, and even as I said before, market it as a thank you for the improvements that you see happening while you're here. They're going to see things under construction, they're going to see different offerings. Of course, visit many of the things that you've done for the kids, their play areas, you have a kids club, all of that you would be able to firsthand be able to show them what you've done, but they can't enjoy any of it if they can't afford to go. So the only thing I would add to what you're asking here or suggesting is that don't think of this as a 1 or 2 times that they come to the ball game. We want these young children to love the game, and the only way they can is to come and see their favorite baseball player hit a home run and enjoy the whole environment of being there. So I would ask maybe you do a little better than what you've suggested, but it certainly is good to see that you're on that track. Thank you.
We welcome that input, and we'll certainly take that to heart. And I think your point of not just looking at a couple times a year, but rather what's the lifetime relationship that you can have, and I think we'll certainly take that into account. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it.
Very welcome. Councilman
Mr.
Miller, would
Chairman.
you like to ask your question, or would you prefer to wait for the presentation?
I had a question, and it's not on this. It was carried over. My question is on the bed tax. My question, and particularly once we get past COVID and 2025 and so on, and if the bed tax increment produces more than 3 million in any one year, is 3 million the cap, or does the excess go into the capital repair fund?
Chair, to Councilman Miller, we view the 3 million as, again, a variable component. But if it's over 3 million, I think it's certainly to the county's discretion of what an allowable legal use of that increment would be at that time.
So you're saying the guaranteed contribution to the deal is capped from the bed tax at 3 million per year, and beyond that would be discretionary. Is that what you're saying?
Councilman Miller, it's impossible to tell what the world's going to look like, or what the needs will be like, and how the other revenues will be flowing in, say, in 2028, for example. And if it's, let's say it's 5 million in 2028, we have a $2 million increment. Maybe there was a shortfall in the prior year, so maybe the council would want to use more of that at that time, or less of that at that time. So I think it's not necessarily a hard cap, but it's anything over 3 million would be for a discussion.
I'm surprised that this isn't a very clear yes or no. I mean, it would seem to me that either we're required to contribute the bed tax increment up to 3 million per year, or else we're required to contribute the bed tax increment, whatever it is. You know, it would seem to me the deal would be very specific on that point, but I'll accept your answer. Okay, thank you.
Mike's coming to help.
I think what Bob's saying, the chair to Councilman Miller, is, you know, we'll look at the other revenue streams and maybe offset the general fund contribution with the excess bed tax if that's what we want to do. I mean, right now, these are the preliminary numbers, very conservative, and once the deal's done, I'm hoping that, you know, our contributions could be a little bit less overall. And I'm not, maybe I'm misspeaking a little bit from Bob, but I do think we'll have some options with that bed tax, because it does go into the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Alex, thank you for your patience. The floor is yours.
Would you like me to restart the presentation?
Sure, yes.
So I'd like to take this opportunity to just, as we've talked briefly, follow up on Councilmember Baker's question on how we can better connect with families. And I think as we've illuminated, we really appreciate those questions. I know both of my role in marketing, I'm also a father of 2 young girls. I know how important it is for us and our organization to connect with families. So the following handful of slides, we're going to provide more background on what we've done to better connect with families and also our proposed response for 2022. I don't, just want to have. So Neil Weiss noted in his presentation on ballpark improvements that our mission as an organization is both to win the World Series and develop a compelling fan experience. And for us to have a truly great fan experience, we know it's critical to be a destination for families in particular. Baseball is a really great family sport. It can help connect different generations of families together. They can create a really great bond around memories they have and shared experiences around the team. And knowing that our entire organization wants to do our best to be a place for families. And families have told us in a lot of research that we've done how important we are as a connector for them and for parents to be better connected to their kids. So what have we done in the last several years, starting in 2015 in particular? Our ownership invested $44 million in renovations, privately financed. A big portion of that was to create a dedicated family deck, which I'll touch on in a little bit in a following slide. Every Sunday is dedicated is Kids Fun Day, where we have a series of kids-oriented activities. We have a dedicated kids fan club, and as touched on in response to Councilmember Baker's question, we have a series of ticket offers that we have and will continue to enhance for 2022. So as part of that 2015 renovation, we developed what we call our Kids Clubhouse. So this is within the mezzanine level of our right field deck called the Family Deck. This is both an outdoor and indoor set of activities we have really designed for kids in mind. And this is a free amenity to all fans who purchase a ticket to the game. And that indoor-outdoor combination of activities is about 30,000 square feet. So it's a meaningful amount of activities and space for kids to play with. We converted multiple private suites into a 2-story indoor kids-focused activity center. And then we also have an adjacent outdoor space in the concourse that's also developed for kids in mind. And this has been a really significant part of our renovations. It's been a really big hit with families. Back in 2019, we had over 50,000 families enjoy this space alone. At the same time, in 2015, we also felt it was important to develop what we call our MVP club. So this is a specially designed club with kids in mind. We want to establish that long-term connection between our organization, kids, and families. We have about 3,000 members. We have a really high satisfaction rate. And this is a pretty cool program where for a relatively nominal fee of $25, there's about a $70 value that kids get back through a combination of merchandise, tickets, and they also get a badge with loaded value for food and beverage and merchandise. And then the more they come to our games, the more they get access to unique experiences, player Q&A, first in line to run the bases, et cetera. But this is a really a complementary program to the space that we designed back in 2015. So a couple final pieces I wanted to share. We touched on this briefly in the response to Councilmember Baker. We've had some existing ticket offers, kids ticket, which I touched on, and a family value ticket, which I also touched on as a test. We're continuing to look at enhancing those as we move forward in 2022. One additional thing I think it's important to note is we provide a lot of community tickets throughout Northeast Ohio. We partner with the Boys and Girls Club, CMSD, as well as our Play Ball CLE program, which is recreational youth teams and leagues throughout Cleveland. And in 2021, in a pandemic impacted season, we distributed over 2,000 tickets, and in a normal season, that would likely be double that. We provide the City Rec with over 100 tickets a game so that any of the youth participants can attend with their families. And one thing that we would like to propose for the council is we would like to provide, if you're open to this, tickets for each council member to offer families in their communities. So this could either be 4 tickets a game throughout the 81 game season, or this could be 100 tickets for 3 games. We're very flexible on that, but that's an offer we would like to propose for each of the council members here. And the last slide is really just the 3 offers that we're looking at for 2022. And I think the main thing that we want to convey here is we are really focused on enhancing the value and having a very attractive opening price point ticket for families in 2022. We're committed to ensuring we have the right value for families, and we're testing several options to try and do that. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I will answer any questions that folks have.
Thank you, Alex. Are there any further questions? All right. All right, thank you. Are there any questions in general on anything at this point?
Council President Jones, is your microphone on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, it's hard to hear you.
So you're telling me to speak up?
Yes, please.
All right, I like the way you put it very gently. All right.
Mr.
Okay.
President?
Councilman Miller.
I have one question for the Guardians.
If you'd like to ask your question, then I'm sure the appropriate person will come up.
My question is, how much in privately funded ballpark improvements have the Guardians done since since they've been at Progressive Field?
Through the President to Councilman Miller. The improvements that I think Alex just referenced were, I'm Joseph Sindarsik, I'm Vice President, General Counsel of the club. The privately funded improvements that were done in 2015 were approximately $44 million. Prior to that, there were really no ballpark improvements of any significance, although there were any number of smaller improvements which the team was doing, whether they were doing it as part of their portion as minor capital repairs, or whether they were just changes that were being made inside the ballpark in order to improve the fan experience. Each year we do any number of that, which probably averages, since we came into the ballpark, about $2 to $3 million a year. So the combination of all of that would be a good reflection on what the private investment into ballpark improvements would have been.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Again, thank you to this entire council for the many questions and the due diligence that we have all done on this part of the process. But if there are no further questions at this moment, I will make a motion to move these 2 resolutions, 0218 and 0219, to the full council agenda for consideration for second reading.
Second.
Properly moved in second. Again, any further discussion? If not, although
Mr. President?
Councilman Miller, the floor is yours.
I have just a couple of comments. One is that I would like to address the issue about the negotiations being secret. I think I'm about as strong a supporter of open public process and open government as there is. But I think you just cannot conduct this kind of negotiation in public. I think the principles the public leaders and the team leaders have to get together and negotiate a tentative agreement and bring it to the legislative bodies, which is exactly what they've done. And it's not been a secret for many months that these negotiations have been underway, and there has been time for anybody who has had things to say about this process to say them. So that's the one thing. The other thing is that I definitely am planning to listen to the Progressive Caucus event tonight and hear the other perspective. I've had it on my schedule for some time. However, my provisional opinion is that this agreement is in the best interests of Greater Cleveland, and that as Mr. Silliman stated, the negotiations are difficult. The public entities are not in the strongest position, and I believe that we wisely chose to renovate Progressive Field rather than building a new stadium, which I think is beyond our capabilities. So on that basis, I'm provisionally a yes and ready to vote this out of committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Miller. And not only do I echo your comments, I said the same thing when we led off this part of the process, that the negotiations were done as they were, highly confidentially. And but this time has been our public time for the community. They have come, they have had their opportunity to have their say, and we certainly respect every person who has come in, regardless of their opinions. They've had that opportunity, and we appreciate them being here to share their thoughts. And any council member, as they said, is able to go this evening and hear the alternative economic thoughts and opinions. So again, I think we have made them full aware of what's happening tonight there. I believe they said their time is 6:30 in the evening. So that opportunity is still there. All right, so we've had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Excellent. Is there any miscellaneous business? All right, if not, if nothing else